He used to do a bit of DJing, my ex-partner. He went out one night to DJ and didn't come back for 3 days. And I was like, what? Walked through the door and was like, what's for tea? And I was like, nah, mate, I've packed your bags. He laughed at me. And I never forget that part. And he went, you'll be begging me back in a week. And I was like, no, I don't think so.
Most people in that situation would probably stay because of the kids, won't
Yeah,
they?
yeah. And he was a very controlling, narcissistic. He was very toxic. I think our worlds were so different and I sort of settled for that. It was my first love and I absolutely idolised him, you know. Had 2 babies before I was 20. Was claiming housing benefit and didn't work. And my partner at the time was a drug addict. I sort of broke out of that and was like, I do not want this for my life. The biggest challenge in my life has been getting on stage and making people laugh, which is weird because naturally it comes, you know, it's easy, you know, and I think I'm still navigating that concept of making it a structured thing. My clients were like my first audience, really. I speak to my clients and stuff like that. And I beam about Paul, and I have done from day one. To do a 360, it's quite a vulnerable position to put myself in. But it fills me with a fire.
I'm Lindsey Kane, and welcome to Bedtime Theories. Are you like me? At bedtime, when you're about to fall into a deep slumber, all these questions just pop into your head. What is life? Why are we here? What's my purpose? What is happiness? And is it a choice? So I'm on a mission to unpick all these thoughts and theories that pop into my head and figure out how to live a happy and fulfilled life. So as well as my insights, I couldn't do this alone. I had to invite some incredible guests, some people that I have personally watched over the years and have looked up to and thought, how are they doing what they're doing? So come and jump into bed with me and my guest and listen to Bedtime Theories. Welcome, Laurie. Thank you for coming today. So I just wanted to introduce you. So we kind of know each other via our partners.
Yeah.
Who are both in the comedy world, but I want to get to know you today. Not bothered about your husband. So give us a breakdown of, so how did you get here? How did you get into the world of comedy? I want to hear your backstory.
I think I've always had funny bones. I've always loved comedy for as long as I can remember being on this earth. And I think, don't you start. The dogs are here, by the way, if anyone hears a woof. Yeah, so I've always been mad on comedy, and I think just watching comedy over the years from a child, and I was brought up on like Victoria Wood and like French and Saunders, Harry Enfield and Friends. So all the sketchy stuff I used to love, and I always used to say when I was little, like, I want to do what they do, you know. And then I always used to go to comedy clubs all the time. Going into an adult, I was always the friend that was like, let's go to a comedy club, or let's go and see this comedian or that comedian. And then when I met Paul, it was at the comedy club, and I was on the front row with my friend. I'll tell you the story of how I met Paul. I was meant to go on a date with another guy. Who was a Scouser.
So you had a thing for Scousers?
They're drawn to me and I'm drawn to them. I think it's the humour. Brummies and Scousers are very similar, just one's quicker and one's slower in talking, but they're basically the same. So I was dating a guy who was a Scouser, but he lived down in Devon. Been on a couple of dates, got on dead well, and then he kept sending me videos of this comedian. And I was like, yeah, I think I've seen him. I was like, oh, he's really funny. And I said, oh, have you ever seen him live? And he was like, no, I'd love to, though. So being the lovely person that I am, I went online and was like, right, where does this guy do his comedy? Like, is he touring? Knew nothing about him. So I seen him at the comedy club, Hot Water Comedy Club, where he used to MC and whatever. So I just booked like the nearest tickets that I could. It was on a Tuesday, and I booked a hotel. And then I seen he was touring, and I seen he was touring in Torquay, but months later. So I just bought 2 tickets. I thought, well, if it doesn't work out with this guy, I'll still go and watch Paul Smith anyway. So I surprised this guy, and I was like, oh, guess what? I've got us tickets to the comedy club. I said, I think he's hosting. It's not his show, but I think he's just hosting. And he was like, just went dead weird on me. And hi, if you're watching, Simon. He just went dead weird on me and was like, well, what if I'm busy? And I was like, And he was just giving me weird vibes. I just had a feeling that he was a bit of a player and he was talking to multiple women and going out on multiple. I just had that vibe.
That was your red flag.
Yeah. So I said, all right, no worries. I'll take my mate instead. And he went, what, so you're going to go without me? And I was like, yeah. I booked a hotel. I was like, I'm going to go, like, you know, on a little random Tuesday to Liverpool. So me and my friend, we drove. We worked and then we drove up after. And I said to my friend, I said, we want to get on the front row of this comedy club because that's where this guy takes the piss out of people. And she was like, I don't get the piss took out of me. And I was like, but I do.
Why would you not?
I like to get involved. So we got there, checked in, got down to the comedy club, and they choose the people for the front row because they don't want any crowds or hen do's or stag do's or anything. They like couples or friends. That's what they like. So they chose us to go on the front row. So it was a complete random selection. And I was like, yes, like, and we was on the front row, and then Paul come out and he was just like, started taking the piss out of everyone. And then he took the piss out of me and he said something like, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I cut people. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, I cut people for a living. Because I do microblading, so I do semi-permanent.
I was really concerned and I was like, what is your
got
past?
Some gangster. Got a gangster on the front row. And then that was it then. And then we bumped into each other outside. And
when you say bump, did you wait outside for
No,
him?
actually. I was talking to a couple outside. We was walking down the road and then he come out of the stage door and like literally nearly bumped into me. And he was like, oh, it's Lars off the front row. And I was like, oh, hello. And I was expecting him to be quite cocky and stuff like that. And then he ended up being dead quiet. He was a mute, didn't say nothing. He was so nervous, so shy, which is a weird thing because everyone expects him to be all cocky. And then so my friends were just like, oh, it's just so typical for you to end up with a comedian. And I think the reason why I was with Paul for some years before, he was like, we'd done our podcast. So we started a podcast just on a whim because he had his own podcast called the Paul Smith Podcast where he had guests on. And then it was lockdown and he couldn't get any guests. So it was the second lockdown in the January. And he said, do you want to just jump on and we'll just do like a lockdown special at home and we'll just have a chat. And I was like, oh, sound, you know. And there was no expectation for me because I was just filling in.
And was it the first time you've ever done something like
first time I've performed? So I've done uni, performing arts at uni, and I've done performances and dance and, you know, comedy and sketches and stuff like that. But I'd never just performed as myself. And I've never been a camera girl in terms of like, I've never, you know, when you hear your own voice and it's vile. I was the same as everybody else. I'd never got over that. So I'd never used to do lives or anything like that because it used to ick me out. I didn't know how I was going to be with it because I was having to just be myself and not be in character or not have a script or not, you know. And we'd set all the gear up in the kitchen and he just pressed record. I had my pyjamas on.
Yeah.
Like I am now. I think it brings out the best in you.
Yeah.
We just started chatting. When we stopped recording, Paul turned to me and he was like, oh my God, you was amazing. We recorded for like 2 hours. We set it out to the world, a podcast world. And then everyone was like, oh, keep Laurie in. Like, so we changed the name and to What's the Story, Paul and Laurie. It just was really popular and we just didn't expect it to. But I think we used to do lives. We used to have a bottle of wine and we used to sit in and just talk. And then Paul was like, have you ever thought about trying comedy? And I was like, not really in terms of like stand-up. And he said, because really the things that you talk about, you don't think is funny. Like, it's funny,
like,
you know.
Is it more observational stuff?
Yeah, just talking about my life. I think I always have a funny spin on everything. Like, I'm always that person that breaks the tension in a room, you know, think of something funny to say in any situation. I think when I look back, I've always been, even as a child, I was like that.
When you were a child, were you You know, they say about comedians, the reason they end up being comedians, they say either they're sad themselves or they probably didn't get attention growing up from one of their parents. Do you think, can you see yourself in that or not really?
I don't know really, because I was an only child till I was 14. By the age of 14, I didn't want to be anywhere near my mother, you know, 'cause it's just like, so I was off out and stuff, but I'm not a sad person. So no, really, I think I just enjoyed, from a young age, if I ever made somebody laugh, I liked it. And I've always liked making people laugh.
It's a skill, isn't it? It's actually a superpower.
Yeah, but like naturally though, and I think the biggest challenge in my life has been getting on stage and making people laugh, which is weird because naturally it comes, you know, it's easy, but when you have to structure it and get up and you have to time it and you have to have a pace and you have to have, there's a reason to what you're saying and every word has to matter and you know, and you have to think of callbacks and all of these things, it makes it so serious, you know. And I think I'm still navigating that concept of making it a structured thing. I think that's why I MC as well, so...
And that's a good skill to practice, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's weird because going into the world as a comedian or starting out as a comedian, naturally I sort of warm towards wanting to do MCing and just not having a script, because I'm very comfortable talking to people without knowing what I'm going to say. I think that fills me with a lot of ease, whereas if I've got to remember stuff, that's what's like, oh, because I have a terrible memory.
When Russell's doing it, he'll have some sort of a semi-structure.
Yeah.
But he goes on and for like the first half hour, he's just improvising to work out what kind of audience it is and which kind of joke style they'll want. So it's fascinating to see how he does public speaking, because I'm going into public speaking now. It's a whole new world to me. And I've got the best teacher, really. And so similar to you, basically the exact same. I was on front row.
So how did you meet Russell then?
So Russell was touring and he was in Chester, and an ex-boyfriend split up with me, really bad breakup, and I was going out a lot, coming in, and my mum and dad are quite like night owls, and they were watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, the after show, and Russell used to host the after show where he'd meet the guests that coming out of the jungle, and they were like, oh my god, this guy's so funny, you should, wow, Lindsey, come and sit down and watch him. And my dad said, oh, I'd love to see him on tour. So for Christmas I thought, oh, I'll see if he's touring, bought tickets. I'd never seen him before, and then I just so happened to message a friend of mine going, oh, I'm in your neck of the woods tonight, where should I go for dinner? I'm taking my parents for dinner and taking them to this comedian's gig. And she said, oh, I've got someone that works at that theatre, I'll see if she reserves seats for you. So we got to the theatre, we got put in the gods because it was on reserved seating. And I checked my phone and I said, oh, Dad, like Mum, Dad, Elise said her friends reserved seats. And my dad said, oh, Lindsey, let's just stay here. Let's just stay here. I was like, no, I'm going to go. So I went to the security guard and was like, excuse me, apparently like seats have been reserved for me, centre in the front row. And he just took the piss out of me the whole like 2 hours.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah, and then so nothing happened. Like I just left the gig. And then like about a month or so later, maybe 2 months, he tweeted a word that he said to me in the gig, Minky, which he was taking the mick out of me. I had like this fake fur coat on. So I didn't look desperate. I got my friend to tweet him back and tag me in it and say, this is my friend. So he's followed me, and then we just started messaging each other. Yeah. And then one day I just thought, fuck, all my relationships have not worked. I'm going to do the opposite of what I've ever done before. I always wait for the guy to make the move. I'm just going to phone him. So I phoned him when I got drunk one night, and he said, you sounded like a little old lady. He said, I wasn't expecting you to sound. He said, you sounded so wise. It sort of took it slow. He was very open and honest with me about he was single, he'd been in relationships a long time, he was out dating. And I was like, yeah, I'm the same. And it was refreshing to have a man, instead of playing games with me, he was like, I'm just letting you know where I'm at. I'm not ready to get into another relationship.
That's what we, because when me and Paul started talking, we seen each other. We had a little photo. It's weird because today is the anniversary of the day we met.
Oh, congratulations.
So it's nice to talk about it on the day that we met. So I went off, and then we kind of looked back at each other. It was weird. I know this sounds really like cringe, but
did you know? Is that what you're trying to say?
it was a weird moment that we had. Paul's not really like a flirty person. People expect it to be very rock and roll, like, you know, when doing shows, and they think it's cocaine and hookers backstage and stuff like that. But it's just not like that. Paul is very
lonely,
quiet, and like he's very... And me and my friend went out and we went back to the hotel, and then in the morning woke up and I had a message off Paul on Instagram.
How did he find you?
Because I tagged him in the photo.
Okay.
So he messaged me and said, because I told him that I was meant to go on a date with this guy. He was like, "Oh, I'm gutted you got a boyfriend. I thought we had something special." Like in a jokey way. And I said, "Oh, he's not my boyfriend." I said he was just a date anyway. I got back home and he FaceTimed, so I'd give him my number and we had some funny chats. We actually read our first like combos and they were so funny. Aww. And I was on fire.
Do you know what? This is what I found. So if you're very naturally funny, like, it would have come easy to you, but everything I was messaging Russell, I was like sending it to my friend, "Is that funny?" Because there was a lot of pressure to try and be funny against a comedian. I'm never going to win that battle. Because
Paul was dead quiet, I just expected him. So my A game turned on, you know, because I can be very witty and like quick. And I think he enjoyed not having to be the funny one. And I think that still is prevalent in our relationship. So in any social situations, we'll go out and he just loves that he doesn't have to be the one that is the jester. And I will naturally take over. We complement each other very well. And so people joke and say, "Oh, she's more funnier than you know, like," and that's the sort of running theme. I mean, Paul is absolutely amazing at what he does, but in social, normal situations, he's very happy to take the back seat. Yeah, and he likes it.
Have you got children with Paul, or have you got...
No. So I've got 3 children. One of them is 20 in November. What the fuck happened there? I was 19. I wasn't like 14 or anything. I was 19.
The big questions then.
Yeah, so I had 2 children very young. So I've got a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old. It's weird when I look back to my life back then, because it is like not a different person inside in terms of confidence. So different. I was with an absolute bum of a guy, and I was with him from the age of 16 and with no prospects or anything. And I think it was my first love, and I absolutely idolized him, you know. I think having children young and his family and stuff like that were very, you need to sort of milk the system as much as you can and go on housing benefit and benefits and stuff like that. And I've not been brought up like that. Both of my sides of my family, very hard workers. I think our worlds were so different, and I sort of settled for that for a short period of time. Had 2 babies before I was 20, was claiming housing benefit, didn't work, and my partner at the time was a drug addict. I had a moment where I was just like, what am I doing? Yeah. But then, luckily, I sort of broke out of that and was like, I do not want this for my life. Like,
so
what am I doing?
What was the one shift, and how old were you?
I think it was just like his family's input.
Values.
It was like, you need to just claim as much as you can. Don't put him on the birth certificate. My mum, because your mum knows everything, right? Your mum is right about everything. And she used to say to me, "Laurie, what are you doing?" I never used to get on with my mum when I was a teenager. I used to think she was being quite negative all the time about, my life, and she was quite disappointed. But now I'm a mother, I can understand, because if how I was acting was my daughter, who's 19, I'd be devastated, that she undersold herself so much, and that's what I did. So I can understand as from my mother's perspective why she was so disappointed. He used to do a bit of DJing, my ex-partner. I remember he went out one night, and I was quite supportive of it. He went out one night to DJ and didn't come back for 3 days, and then he just walked through the door and was like, "What's for tea?" And I was like, "Nah, mate, I've packed your bags. I'll put them in the porch."
How old were you then at this point?
I was 20. 21. Actually,
That's-
21.
To have that realization though at that age,
Yeah.
do you think you would have got to that realization had you not had kids?
I think it was more challenging, the fact that I had kids, because I had 2 children with him when I was 20 years old. And you just feel, I thought that was my life over, you know.
Most people in that situation would probably stay because of the kids, won't
Yeah,
they?
yeah. And he was a very controlling, narcissistic, he was not well in terms of, like, it was very toxic, the relationship that we had. It wasn't domestic abuse, because I think I'm not a vulnerable person, like, naturally I'm not. But it was very sort of mentally draining, you know. I was dead calm about it, so we come back, and I was just like, no, I packed your stuff. It's in the porch. That's it. And he was like, he laughed at me. And I never forget that part. I don't remember anything around it, but I never forget. He laughed at me, and he went, you'll be begging me back in a week. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And he went out laughing, and then God knows where he went. And then that was it was the shift. But it wasn't just because he'd gone out for 3 days.
It was just
I think it was a build up. Yeah, that was just it. And oh God, everything that went in afterwards, like, oh, he made it very difficult. And then about 3 months after that, I got a phone call. Oh, he broke into the house and through the window and broke all the window, and we had a scuffle, and people called the police, and it was a nightmare. It was horrible time. I think I blocked a lot of it out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then 3 months later, I got a phone call to say that he'd been arrested. He'd never been in trouble before, miraculously. I don't know how, but they phoned and said he's been arrested, and I was like, oh, what for, you know? And he was like, they were like, armed robbery. And I was like, what? Armed robbery? Like, because he wasn't like a criminal person. He was just a bit of a bum and a bit of a druggie. I was like, armed robbery? Like, so he just met this guy and then just got caught up, obviously, on a sort of rampage, because since our breakup. And then just, like, got roped into doing this robbery on a bloody Londis.
Oh, really? So when you were in the relationship with him, how long were you together in total?
6 years.
So the person you were when you met him to the day you left, had he been chipping away at you and your confidence?
Yeah.
Because I think there's so many people in relationships like this where they're with someone who they're not being themselves, they're not allowed to be themselves around them, or they don't feel comfortable to be themselves around them. What advice would you give to somebody who's like going through a narcissistic relationship?
Yeah, I think those days was very early days, so I didn't really know myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, he got put away for 8 years.
Oh, but yeah.
It was kind of a blessing for me, really, because it made our breakup a lot easier of a transition.
You didn't fancy being like a wife going into prison every
I did
every
take
week?
the children into prison. I wasn't with him,
right.
but I still took my children into prison to see their dad, even though we wasn't together, because I thought, I don't want them to blame me for them not knowing their dad, because I was like, oh, see ya, you know. Some people might disagree with that and be like, why did you do that? I mean, I question it myself sometimes. Like, why did I do that?
Yeah, but you did what you thought was right
at
at the time.
Yeah, because he doesn't have anything to do with them now.
Yeah.
So he's out of prison.
So you were together for 6 years. Why do you think you stayed in that relationship for so long?
I just didn't see myself as worth much at the time, which is crazy, because I've been with him for so long from a young age. That's all I knew, and that's sort of what I thought that I needed to. I just settled for that.
This is what I'm trying to unpick as a society. And I was in a relationship, and my red flags were going all the time. He's a cheater. He's no good. Very super charming and everything. But when I look back now, all my relationship was how can I be the best version of myself for him? And I'm like, oh my God, but there's so many of my friends that have been in relationships like that, or still in relationships like that. Where does it come from for you, where you didn't feel worthy enough to like leave, or, the unknown, will I find someone better? Like, where does that stem from? That's what I'm trying to get to
I think,
core of it.
Not to blame anybody around me, but maybe if you think about it, I think because I fell pregnant young, and it's that disappointment I could feel that my mother had of me. And I think it's almost like, wow, I've gone and thrown because I went to college and done dance and, I didn't go to uni till later on in life, but I think it was just like, I just really undersold myself. And I thought that's what was all I was good for, really. I think maybe just disappointment from family, disappointment in myself, and just I think the thing that turned it around was when I was being pressured to live this really mediocre, low level life. And I knew there's something in me that just was like screaming, just going, no, like, you're better than this. Paul is the first person, and it took until I was like, 5 years now since I met Paul. He's the first person in my life where I've not had to be somebody different. And the podcast taught me that me being myself was enough. I know everyone just like thinks that it's just a podcast, but that podcast and my relationship with Paul, and then that podcast changed or transformed my own opinion of myself to just know that I should be proud of just who I am, and that's it. And if anyone has got a problem with it, then
it's not your problem, it's their problem. Yeah. I think it's interesting because, again, I have a lot of, over the years, friends and different people where they're in relationships and it is toxic and their partners aren't letting them do certain things, and they don't see it that is a form of control. And now I'm out of that relationship, like with my ex, I can see it so clearly now. But this is one of the reasons why I want to talk about these things, because I want to say, don't stay in relationships like that because you don't think you're not worth anything else, or because of the kids. Because the flip side of it, which concerns me, thank God I didn't get pregnant with my ex, thank God. But what it shows, what it teaches the children to stay in those kind of relationships, teach your kids that you're not enough, so you've got to put yourself last all the time. Everyone else comes before you. Whereas like now with my daughter, she's 8, I'm really teaching her about self-love, to start first, be your own first true love. Don't look for love and validation from your partner, because that's unhealthy. I remember when I got with Russ and I'd be like, I'm thinking of doing this, and he'd be like, yeah, great. And a part of me would be like, what's wrong with him? Why doesn't he care? But it's not that he didn't care. He's just like, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, because you're used to. Yeah,
whereas my ex would be like, you shouldn't do that.
It takes a while to adjust to that.
But really, what it was meaning was, don't do that because it will make me look bad, because you're an extension of me. Yeah. My ex used to, and at the time I used to think it was really sweet, he'd like buy me a wardrobe of outfits. And I'd be like, oh, how lovely is that? So kind
Love
that he's gone out. But actually, I was a fucking doll. I was his dolly. He dressed up to make himself look great. Or so for years I was always insecure about my fashion sense, because he obviously doesn't like how I dress, because he's buying a wardrobe that's totally not like my style. But I was wearing it because I thought, well, he's bought it and he's made the effort. Now I'm like, that was just a form of control. It's not as if like, I've expressed an opinion where, I love that bag, or I love those shoes, I just can't afford it.
It's a way to make you feel insecure and not sure of your own decisions and everything else.
But it's so
subtle, isn't it?
Subtle, that's the word I'm looking for. It's so subtle over a period of time, whereas now I'm out of it and I'm like, there's so many women in these relationships, we have to try and help them out. Do you
know what was this has been a really big factor in the difference in my relationship with Paul. So I've always searched, so throughout all of my mistakes in men, I've always searched for somebody who is going to be equal to me, because I'm a trusting person, but I'm also a very intuitive person. So if something isn't right, I trust my gut 100%. And I know the difference between feeling insecure or feeling jealous or feeling... I think we all have it. We're all human.
Have you always had this intuition?
Yeah. Even when I was a child, I used to have a real sense of energy, and I just used to feel things weren't right. But I know the difference between knowing when it's a me problem, when I'm being insecure, and when something's not right. And I feel like trust is a big part of mine and Paul's, because half the time I live down in Devon. So 1 week I'm in Devon because that's when I have my 7-year-old. So I've got a 7-year-old child as well. So I live half in Devon, and then the 1 week I'll go up to Liverpool, or we go on tour or whatever. So if we wasn't secure to a point in ourselves, our marriage would not work. Our whole relationship wouldn't work. And when we first got together, Paul was very honest with me. He said, I've talked to other people, and he knew that I was meant to go on a date with him. But in the beginning, our first 3 or 4 weeks of us meeting, we just spoke on WhatsApp and FaceTime and on the phone as friends. I didn't care who he was, or, at the time, he was like sort of a bit well known at the time, but I didn't care about that. I just cared about what type of a person he was. He was the same as well, so I learned that about him. So as we got speaking to each other, we started speaking on a deeper level, and I thought, this person is matching my mind. Like, it was like a meeting of minds where we can speak very deeply about things, and we're very good at reading people and understanding psychology and the reason why people do the things that they do. And he's the only person that I have ever met that has that same ability.
Emotional intelligence. Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, I feel like I've met, I know it sounds like cheesy, but it's like my soulmate, because anyone who was in a relationship, no one ever had the same sort of depth and understanding as I did. So it always used to break down in communication, because when I used to go on and say, well, I'm feeling this, and they'd be like, oh, don't know what you're talking about, and like I was a psychopath.
Whereas he can be like, oh, me and Russ are like that. In previous relationships, it would just a breakdown of communication, but now we read a parenting book, like how to speak to toddlers, but that's how we speak to each other. So when you did that, it made me feel like when we sort of break it down like that. You just mentioned about intuition. Is Paul like that? Is he quite good?
Yeah, God, wait, it's in his job.
I was just about to say, is it a comedian thing? Because Russell's like a psychic. Yeah. And I don't believe in psychics, but honestly, he'll get someone's name, where they're from. Yeah. We'll be on holiday and he'll go, they're British, they're Essex, or they're Scottish.
That's what we play. When we go anywhere, we sit and we play. Right, what do you reckon their game is? It's so sad. Like, we'll sit there and he'll go, right, he's a businessman, and I'll go, I dare you to go and ask him, and like we never do, but when he's on stage and he's picking on the front row, and he'll always go, oh, I bet you're in the gym, blah, blah, blah. And then he'll be correcting, he'll get names right, and some weird, or jobs that people do correct, and he's got them right on camera,
Well, Russell says that's what psychics are. They are just people that can read people. Read. That's all it is. He said they're not in touch with whoever. No. They are just really good at reading body language and the odd twitch here and there. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do bedtime theories, because there's so many people that I see today, even in relationships or marriage, where they're in very toxic environments and they might maybe don't have the courage to leave or don't even realize they're in it. And I just think, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you here to chat, because we've got so many similarities with our previous partners. Yeah. It's quite rare where you speak so highly and kindly about your partner. Do you have a lot of friends around you where they're just really mean about their partners? Because I'm really kind of distancing myself from people like that. Yeah,
and my clients were like my first audience, really, because I speak to my clients and stuff like that. And I beam about Paul, and I have done from day one, and I always do. And I really feel, when I hear what you've just said, people go, oh, he's doing is this, that, and the other. And don't get me wrong, Paul does my editing, but I do his editing. But I think people forget, gratitude in terms of their partners, and obviously not everybody is with the right person, and I think probably you're the same. Because you and Russell are the same as me and Paul, you can probably, from the outside, you can see something's not right in someone's relationship. And I think you can't advise people on who they should be with and what they should put up with, because I'm in a position now where I'm very content in a good way, not in a settled way. I'm very content with my relationship, but you can notice it.
So do people ever assume that you're doing comedy because of Paul?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of truth in that, you know, because really, sort of being introduced into Paul's world, it's a weird thing, and Paul will say this, and he has said this. Yeah, I have a weird understanding of comedy, and there's many times when I have sat down with Paul and restructured his shows with him. Nobody else, he said, these are words from his mouth, has ever listened to. And I don't know why that is. I couldn't tell you why that is. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm not.
You've got a good ear for like timing and
I think we're both similar. So how Paul is on stage, that's the kind of comedy that I like. So I know everybody knows him for being taking a piss, but his actual tour shows are stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I relate to the most. So I have an understanding of where certain information should go. And then I think going on to doing comedy myself has been quite sort of difficult because I have an understanding of comedy, but because I'm a storyteller, same as Paul, and I've been used to seeing him do big long tour shows, I haven't been used to seeing him do like 10-minute slots in some gig in bloody Crosby or whatever, you know, like it's so different when you're trying to work from the bottom. And that's what I've always wanted to do. I never wanted to be like, right, I'm Paul Smith's wife.
Yeah.
Put me in this big show. I've done some shit gigs and I'm still doing shit gigs, you know, but I think it makes you a better comic.
Oh my God,
doing
you have
those
to start doing the shit gigs. Like people message Russell all the time, oh, how can I do comedy? And it's like, you've got to do like 10 years minimum, unpaid, doing the shittest venue, just going on to people that either hate you, don't even know who you are, and you've got to try and get them to, you know,
the shittest gig I've ever done was in Widnes, right? It was in a pub and it was full of football hooligans, right? The football was on.
Oh, God.
And these guys were ripping all the acts that was on. I was like, oh my God, I'm dreading it. They're not listening to anyone. But that shit gig was the gig that made me realise that I wanted to do MCing, because I went up there, tried to do my material. They was not fucking listening. And I was like, fuck this, put my notes down. And I just went, right, what's your name? And then I just started. And I was like, it set a fire off in me. And I was like, oh,
you enjoyed
love it. And I'd just done about 20 minutes of just chatting to everyone. And then they all engaged with me. So it was that thing that I was forced to let go of all this material that I'd wrote that made me realise that I was probably really good at MCing.
But also being open-minded to know, right, this isn't working, we've got to pivot, and I'm going to change.
On the spot.
On the spot.
It was scary, but and I could feel it on stage. It's the first time in my life where I ever felt like excited, and I didn't have a clue what I was going to say, but I was just taking the piss out of these horrible men in the front row. But they liked it, and they liked me, and they listened to me, and it's all they needed, these horrible skinhead men that were just being awful to these comedians that was on before me. And because I was giving them some shit in a cheeky sort of way, they loved it.
And also there's not a huge amount of female comedians as well, so I think it's great to get into that space within itself. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe wanting to step out of their comfort zone, try something completely new, try a different career, or, you know, maybe even in the public eye? What advice would you give to them?
I think I would just say that nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah.
Because everyone is so worried about what everyone thinks. And also, it's scary letting go of the identity that you had, especially if you've been successful in whatever it is that you're wanting to change. It's such a scary thing, but no one gives a fuck. And like worrying about what other people are going to say, like there was that thing about when I started comedy that, everyone's going to be like, oh, she's doing it, she's just jumping on the bandwagon. And I really had to battle with that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you only live once, and you can't live your life based on what other people think of you. I still do. I've still got my salon down south. You know, I've got girls that sort of work in it and stuff like that. But I used to graft till 11 o'clock on the night, you know, doing brows just constantly, day and night. And I was very successful in it, and I still am. For me to do a 360, it's quite a vulnerable position to put myself in. And I've had to step away from brows a lot. But it fills me with a fire that is just makes me, I don't know, it just lights me up inside. And I think if you're drawn to something that has just been, you know, that you get that little voice, and it's just there going, go on, do this, do that, or like, you know, a desire or an interest in something, and you think, oh, I'm going to try and be practical and just shove that. Don't ever push that down, because that could be the thing that will have your height of happiness in your life and can just, you know, light you up.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in today.
No, thank you.
And having a chat.
Dogs and all, jammies.
I know.
I'm going to get on the train like this now.
Yeah, you should totally do. Well, it's night from everyone here at Bedtime Theory, so thank you very much.
Night.